aware of the things that aren't.
Yeah, they're more aware that isn't right than the things that it is right.
So you can label this video how to deal with Sun in Virgo. We will get eventually.
I want to talk about Jupiter, and Jupiter is a really important planet for a woman, especially for a husband. And they say that Mars is good for a boyfriend in Western astrology. Yeah, so, and then in Jupiter is more important for husband material in Vedic astrology.
Right, absolutely. You know, Jupiter is a very, very fascinating planet. Because like you have because the relationship that Jupiter has with its exaltation point. So Jupiter, whose Mula Trikone, where he sources its energy, is Sagittarius, and Sagittarius itself is a very militaristic sign. In fact, I think I'm probably going to butcher this, but I want to say it's either, I think it's Brihat Jataka that talks about it gives such a wonderful description of all the things related to the signs. And one of the things that it's related to military bases, it's related to like weapons and stuff. And at first, like when I first read that, I was like, Jupiter? I thought Jupiter was the big gentle planet. Well, Jupiter, if you think about the energy, so Sagittarius, right? Sagittarius is like the bowman.
Yeah.
And so Jupiter has a lot to do with like the direction and the goal of where we want to be, but it's really that, but it's that big picture. It's like holding the big picture and knowing where you want to go with things and being able to like initiate and take the energy of that. And if you think about like a husband, right? Isn't that what you want? Is the guy that's strong and determined and fierce to a certain degree, not in necessarily a negative way, but you know, is like will do the, and that's kind of like the militaristic nature of Jupiter, like that kind of like, I'm going to do that. I'm going, you know, and there's a lot of other gentle aspects of Jupiter. And then the other thing that I find most fascinating, and I think this is really what makes us human. And like when we were talking about earlier, like what masculine, like this is masculine energy. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of like the masculine male archetype or model in our societal role. And what's interesting about Jupiter is Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, the same place where Mars is debilitated. So it's like the Jupiterian aspect of things, because Jupiter is also a planet so much about creativity. And it's really about like, and Ernst talks about this too, that like Jupiter, which is like, so there's all these Varga charts, all these like, so in the relationship Varga chart, right? The Saptamsha, the D7 as it's called, Jupiter is the most important planet in that. And what Ernst says is because Jupiter represents not only our creativity and the things we want to procreate with, but it represents our lineage or our dynasty. And so it's like, that's the guy that you want, the one that you're going to, that knows where he wants to be, right? Because like, if you have dynasty, you don't just stumble onto a dynasty, you know? And yes, a dynasty is something you leave behind, but it's like the great thing you leave behind because you got there because you knew that's where you wanted to be. You start a dynasty, you get to, your dynasty is whatever it is that you have built, that you have grown, that you have like, and growth is a big thing about Jupiter. And then being related to Cancer, what this kind of shows is how the masculine energy is also at its best. Like there's always a balance that we need to find. And what I really find in our society with the most modern American male archetype is this inability to show their feelings or to to add, to be, yeah, to show their feelings, to be seen as someone who is vulnerable. And what's interesting is I think of that like with Jupiter, which is like you're doing this thing, whatever that is that you're doing, you know, that you're setting your sights on to create your dynasty, like you're actually, you should, the best way to use that energy is to be gentle with it, and to be caring, and to get in touch with, like, it should help you to define who you are as an individual as well. Like, it shouldn't just be the thing that you want to become strictly because you want to be seen that way or something like that. Like, I just want to be at the top. That can be kind of a Mars energy, right? With Jupiter, it's in Jupiter, if you look at the signs too, Jupiter rules the 9th and the 12th. It's kind of like the furthest evolved planet you could look at in a way. So it's like the evolution of the male energy is that of helping you to understand and feel who you are at the same time. So that dynasty that you create is a product of the person that you are inside of you and who you are in your heart too.
Right. And I noticed that when somebody, especially a male, when he has Jupiter in Cancer, he's polite.
Right.
He doesn't have that harsh speech, or he can't express himself. Right? Jupiter and Moon. It's Jupiter in Cancer. So that's really, he's polite. The choice of weapon that I noticed in our modern society for Jupiter or Sagittarius is actually a sniper.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right? So because he's looking on bird's eye's point of view. So he's seeing the bigger picture of life.
Right.
So he's not the soldier fighting the ground. He's up above bird's eyes to see the overall, structure of the relationship or the business or whatever. He's overseeing everything. And he's also a philosopher. Like, he has philosophy and he has wisdom. And that's what maybe women are more attracted to, is that wisdom.
Right. Right. Because if you think about like wisdom, and that's interesting. I mean, this didn't really occur to me until right now talking to you, is like, there's so much about wisdom that is a calm sort of confidence. It's an intellectual confidence, because it's like you're calm inside yourself. And it's like that Jupiter in Cancer, right? Like, you're able to, like, you have your goals and everything, but you don't have to step on other people to get there.
Right. That's very true. So it's kind of interesting when we're kind of talking, like, there's new ideas that come from you, and I kind of get reminded by your stuff as well. So it's kind of really interesting that how things are colliding. Yeah. So I noticed that that's probably the reason why women, for a woman, it's really important to have a Jupiter, or she's attracted to a Jupiter. And it depends on the archetype, obviously, because in the chart, there's a different archetype, but Jupiter represents husband. And if you have a healthy Jupiter, you're going to have a healthy point of view. You're more grateful for the things that you have, and you see the greater things. You have wisdom of knowledge, right? You go after the knowledge of, and also represent your professors, your gurus and teachers and professors, and your higher being as well. So I think that's really important as a man to have that, because it's him surviving, right? If you don't know how to go to the bank and apply for a mortgage, that wisdom of knowledge, you might be doomed. You might not have a home for potentially having a wife, right?
Right. So, absolutely.
So that being said, like, I think those are 3 planets we talked about: the Sun, the Mars. I wanted you touch base on the Mars, because the Mars also is celibate as well.
Interesting.
Or can be celibate. I'm not too sure.
Well, you can see that. I mean, that's that singular focus of the Mars. I mean, and that's like I always find it so funny, is it's like so much of astrology is just right out there. If you want to understand it, you just got to pay attention to society and life in general. Like, you hear about the martial arts, you hear about yoga. Yoga is so much related to Mars, because it's like Mars, you're absolutely right. Mars is the planet of austerity, because austerity takes that, like, because that's the closed-mindedness of Mars, and that's where Mars is wonderful, is it can be closed-minded and it can be very intense. And if you can turn that in a spiritual direction, absolutely, you could be something that's celibate. But it's also the type of celibate who doesn't care, not being celibate so that they can brag or something, say later and say, look what I did. I was celibate for 5 years or whatever. Or it's not like a weak sun kind of celibacy, which is, that of can't celibate because you never stepped up to the plate or whatever. It's just like, I just was. I just do that. Mars is that planet of austerity.
Right. And the sun is also like, has the knowledge, is intelligence, right? The moon is knowing. So can you elaborate maybe the intelligent part of it?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so real quick, there's 2 planets of knowing.
Okay.
And that is Jupiter and Moon, which is very interesting. Like the Moon is sort of like the planet of just like you said, just like knowing. It's like intuition, right? It's like you just know what it is. Jupiter, I would say, is a little bit more wisdom, because I think wisdom and intuition can very easily kind of like cross paths. And then the sun is the intelligence of the design. Like if you think about the like a kingdom, right? Who has to know the roles of everybody? The king. Because the king needs to be able to use, and this is also what a healthy king, this goes back to that idea of nobility. A king knows to use the people and its resources for the things that they're supposed to be used for. A king knows to use its advisors when it needs advice for things, not for all things, but when it needs advice, it goes to a minister. It doesn't try to use a minister to learn, how do I deal with my wife or whatever. It's more like it goes to the minister to be like, okay, well, what do you think we should do? What action should we take against this country or this person or this invading force or whatever like that? Because that's what that minister, it's like the minister of war. You go to the minister of war to know about the minister of war. It doesn't go to the minister of war to talk about his relationships. And it's because the sun understands the hierarchy. The sun represents that knowledge of just pure intelligence. Not necessarily, because like Sun and Mercury can easily be kind of thrown together, and Sun and Mercury indicate intelligence in the chart, because Mercury is about knowing the details of something. It's the intellect, being able to parse out every little piece of data that there is. The Sun, however, knows how it's all put together. Sun and Jupiter both have a say in the understanding of the bigger picture in life. And then Mars is the logic. Mars is the next step and the next step only. And Mars does not understand or care to have time for any step that does not take it at its goal that it wants. And that's what logic is. Like we always talk about, well, I did the logical thing. Because the idea of logic is there's just one step to take and only one step to take. That's a logical process. And that's that of Mars. Mars just knows it. It's just, and that's kind of that idea of the ram is like, that's kind of what logic is. It's like there's one step to take. It's not Mercury who would be like, well, sure, I could take that step, but what would happen if I took this step and this step and this step and this step? And then, I mean, I might as well talk about all the planets with intelligence. I'm on a roll.
Go for it, Dan.
Venus, the intelligence of Venus, because I've thought about this topic a lot and even watched it, how it works out in people's charts and stuff. And Venus is that ability to just to kind of see, it's that poetic intelligence is how I like to express it. That makes sense to me. And so let me explain that a little bit more. Poetic intelligence is that ability to read between the lines, to see the thing that isn't said, to be able to read body language, to be able to appreciate not necessarily the exact words. Like Mercury is like the rule of a law book, right? Mercury is that like, okay, well, I did it, but it says right here on Article 14-888, it says that I'm allowed to do this thing as long as I have a parrot on my shoulder and I sing a song. And that, whereas like Venus is like, I did that thing, because I could see it was the right thing to do. I can't really explain it or describe it, but Venus has to do with value, and value is such a, I've actually been writing about this lately too. Venus and valuation is about, you try to put value to things, like in our day and age where we have currency values, right, that are like tied to gold and stuff. And like all of that stuff is figured for us societally, so we kind of don't have to. But if you subtracted from your daily transactions, if you did not have that of yourself and you had to say, okay, I need to get this apple from this merchant, what do I give him in return? You know, it's like, it's that ability to know what is fair and what is right. And so, and a lot of valuation, like the intelligence of valuation, which is Venus, is that ability to be able to do that. And then the Saturnian intelligence, which this one is like so underappreciated, is to just know when to let things be what they are, to not try to change things, because Saturn is the servant planet. Saturn is the Shudra. Saturn represents, the public. It represents, but Saturn, also represents ineffectiveness, incapability and stuff. And the reason why, the intelligence that gives is the intelligence to just not feel like you need to change everything. Because there's times in our lives where we just need to be like, this is what it is and it's flawed, but it's okay. And be able to move on. So I think I covered all the planets there. Pretty sure.
You forgot. Yeah. Did you talk about the moon?
Yeah, that was the first one. The planet of the moon.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's really it's really important to have, that's the makeup for an individual. Right. Having all those planets, right? Despite Rahu and Ketu, that's a whole different breed on its own. Yeah, I'm actually
trying to stay away from Rahu and Ketu.
Okay. Yeah. And, I noticed that when a man's sun is not in great strength, he also has effects with his health as well. There's the structure problem, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I noticed that, and as Mars as well, like if he's not really healthy, he has a really hot temper in a relationship.
Right. Because it's that inability to
solve problem.
Right. To problem solve, to effectively assess a situation for what it is.
Right. And then if he's not a healthy Jupiter, and he would kind of go into make his own law or his own belief system. It's different than what the social agrees to.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, Jupiter's that planet represents morality, right? Our own sense of like you said, of law. I mean, and that's what morality basically is like a code of ethics or a law that we kind of develop to each of us individually.
Right. And so, and you notice those things that affects the relationship as a man individually, but also biologically his body as well. It would actually show that as well, because he might be a little bit intimidated, or if it's not healthy, he's intimidating because he can't really attract the right people in his life. So he's going to attract the bad people that he's going to get in a fight with a lot easier. And the people who are healthy, they'll just like, well, see ya. I'm not dealing with you.
I would think that with an unhealthy Jupiter too, is it would be harder for that person to, and I think this is why another reason why Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, is able to flux, able to change their belief systems and how they think that things need to go, by being able to incorporate the changing aspects of reality into their plans. And so if you're in a relationship and you're thinking that you have this like belief or law system that your partner is supposed to be like, is supposed to do what you say or whatever. And maybe when you first started the relationship, it was like that your partner was like, okay, I'll listen to you. But maybe then as the relationship progresses, that person maybe was working on themselves, going to self-help courses, and maybe, got finished their schooling, or they got promoted or something. So now they're feeling more confident. And now the person maybe with a afflicted Jupiter or just a weak Jupiter might not be able to handle that situation. Because instead of adapting to like, oh, wow, now my partner actually is kind of calling the shots sometimes.
Right. So they want you to believe their belief system.
Right. Which that's not healthy. Like the healthy aspect of Jupiter is that ability to, because I mean, isn't that what life is all about? Is the ability to adapt.
Right. And when the relationship is not adaptable, like you, for example, like he wants you to be in a keto diet, but it doesn't work for your body, but that's what his belief system, that you have to be on keto because otherwise you're an alien to him. Right.
And it's so fascinating in a chart. So what this made me think of is if you had somebody with a weak Jupiter whose belief system is kind of rigid, and a strong Mars. So it's like you get that double effect there of like inflexible, because Mars is the planet of not flexing a single degree. And then Jupiter, because if you think about where Jupiter's debilitated in Capricorn, Capricorn is a very restricting set of laws or rules or environment. And so I think of Jupiter as weak, as like stuck in its philosophy, using a philosophy that just doesn't work, or being stuck in a situation, something like that. And then if you had a strong Mars at the same time, you're just going to keep going forward in a very narrow mind frame.
Yeah, because also it's a little bit off topic as well. When you don't have a healthy Jupiter, and since your belief of the view of your life has to be a certain way, if it's not in a certain way, there's a reason why a lot of people commit suicide, either because of Mars or is it because of Jupiter and the sun issue.
Right.
And that's the masculine part. That's us to go, like how you were saying, is to push that punch forward so that you have the will to live.
Right. And you look at the cruel planets, aside from the nodes, if you just look at the 7 planets, right? The cruel planets are Mars and Sun, and then you have Saturn, of course, but the 2 gentle planets, the Moon, I don't really ever look at the Moon as a cruel planet necessarily. Yeah. It's got its own weird way of affecting situations, but and then Venus is not a cruel planet. Mercury, like the Moon, gets this classification as a cruel planet if it's with cruel planets, but it's never really a cruel planet. Like, I could see why Sun and Mars, it's like, and Jupiter, like if that's all just astray, it's like everything has to be like this. I'm not living up to that. I'm not capable of that. I don't even know how that's possible. Here I am wanting that, and then here I am. How am I going to, there's no way I can break through these hurdles. There's no way I can do this.
That is very true. And you see that even in a man's chart as well, when he has Venus in Virgo. So he can be very picky, particular.
Right.
Very OCD, if you want to call it that. Right? But that's not how you really express love, right? You can't tell your partner you have to do this way, because that's not, if you're not doing this way, then that means you don't love me.
Oh gosh, Virgo is such an it's the sign of refinement, and it's the sign of this is why I'm like, Virgo people are just like you said. I mean, it's the sign of perfection, of wanting things to be better. Like I've seen like Sun and Virgo people, you have to watch out for, because it's gonna now I'm sounding like a Western astrologer. No offense, what does that mean? Astrologer, and you're watching this, thank you for watching. There's nothing wrong with this, but there's a lot of that. That's all it is. Just if you have Sun and Virgo, you're like this. But I have noticed it with a lot of planets of Virgo. Is like especially the cruel planets, you get the people that it's just never good enough. I feel like I've done at least half a dozen consultations where it was like, there's a lot of stuff going on in Virgo, and what I had to say to the person is like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect. And it's like, I go into the consultation knowing that like, yeah, I'm going to talk about this and this and this and this and this, because, you know, I want to be thorough with what I'm doing and make them feel like they're getting, you know, value out of the time that they're spending with me.
Right.
But I'm like, I know the lesson they need to hear is this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because Virgo is really representing the little girl that hasn't hit puberty, so she's kind of wanting everything like a virgin-like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So she's going to be ill, this is gross, or like, I want perfection of this. Like, if it's not made like that, I'm unhappy, I'm going to make a fuss about it. And if you have a cruel planet, it's like, it's always going to make a fuss. There's no perfect to them. To their
right.
eyes.
And then like the sun being a sign being symbolic of purity and representing like of always getting better, and Virgo is that purifying fire,
right?
And is that element of like that, so you get like that sun in there. Like the specific chart that I'm thinking of had sun in K2 in Virgo in the first house, and so it was all about, it was so much like, why isn't everything just the way I want it to be? I find Virgo people, planets, especially Sun and Mars in Virgo.
Oh, wow. So you got a military general.
Yeah.
Wanting...
They want to make things better.
Yeah.
They're also aware of the things that aren't.
Yeah. They're more aware that isn't right than
the
things that it is right.
So you can label this video how to deal with Sun in Virgo. We will get eventually.
Right. Dan, I think we have to wrap it up. I know we ran out of time, and I want to thank you so much for everything, all the wonderful information, and I'm hoping this helps many masculine individual there, or women who are dealing with men with Virgo, Sun, or Mars. And they like their tea or coffee a certain way and they're not getting it right. It's not your fault. That's all I have to say. It's not your fault. Right? So, right. Dan, I know that you're working in a Pacific clinic. If somebody wants to do a reading or getting their Ayurveda, how can they get in contact with you?
So you can go to, the link will be, hopefully you put it in there, it's not my video, in the description below for www.newleafsac.com. You can go through there. There's a portal where you can request scheduling of any type of appointment or reading. We are a full service Ayurvedic clinic, from health consultations to panchakarma to private yoga, astrology, and if you have time, I'll share one tidbit of information. My first astrology reading I ever got in my life was here at New Leaf Ayurveda 6 years ago. And it's why I got into astrology, because they just told me, like, oh, you just went into Rahu Dasha. That's why everything's like so crazy. And I'm like, that's why I'm here. And so like, yeah, so just check out www.newleafsac. You can look me up on YouTube. I'll leave my YouTube URL in there, and yeah, and from there you can easily reach me, and you might even see my bio or whatever else, learn a little bit more about who I am and what I do. So
thank you so much, Dan. I want to thank you so much for my audience to enjoying our conversation here, and I hope you guys learn lots here and take it home and kind of revamp it out in a nicer way in your relationship. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. All right, bye everybody.